Well, we've got a really interesting show tonight. A good friend of mine who I haven't spoken to for, God, a long, long time. We'll be talking about UFOs, targeting individuals, and lots of other things tonight. Can we please welcome Tony Topping to the show? Hello, Tony.
Hello, mate. How are you, Bob? Good evening to you. How are you?
Hey, I'm fine, my friend.
It's been a busy week so far for you. Then, and this is the new venue. Yes, the new place. Yeah, the new place where you're broadcasting from, mate. I trust you're enjoying it. I trust it's better than the other one, is it? Yeah.
Oh yes, we're broadcasting from Indiana.
Oh wow, we're broadcasting from Indiana. Graciously. Well, there's recently been a lot of activity up near Maine. A guy near Maine up in the US called Don Dion. If you look at my YouTube channel, as recently, well over the month actually, you sent me some of the most bizarre things involving UFOs in that area, in Turner, in Maine, in the US. And if you have a look at my YouTube channel, Tony Ops UFO, you'll see it there, Bob. Very good footage, and he's done all the analysis as well. And I'm very lucky in that we've had all the analysis since I last spoke to you. There's been all kinds of crazy stuff happen, but whereby we've just backed it up with image analysis as well. So I think the point of our discussion this evening is all about UFOs, how they probably wreck a person's life, and the conversation surrounding them, and the information that goes on behind the scenes that the public don't probably even see or know about, I would think, Nancy.
That's not true as well. They don't. But no. I know you wanted to talk about targeting individuals. I suppose that's happened to you quite numerous times as well.
Yeah, well, it has, matey. The thing is that if your listeners don't know me, my first UFO experience began, well, we call it UFO, my first paranormal experience began at age 2, where I had an incident, a very strange incident happen, where I can only describe seeing 2 people walk through a wall. That's all I can actually describe it as. Actually, looking back on it, it was quite an esoteric, occult, symbolic type thing that happened, because I think the occult, i.e. what is hidden, UFOs, aliens, all walk hand in hand in this wider universe of ours, and people don't see it. Now, in some cases, there's this written law that says if you're a member of the public dealing with people with behind the scenes with UFOs, you're going to get tagged. In fact, you're going to get targeted as well. And what can happen with a targeted individual? In some cases, Bob, it's not always UFOs. There are some people who will say, "Oh, Tony, I like your mind control stuff, but can you not talk about UFOs?" Well, the answer is no, Bob. I don't apologise. I will not stop talking about UFOs because it's hand in hand. You can be a targeted individual being experimented on with mind control, mind invasive technology, and you can be a targeted individual because you came across an oppressive silence regarding the UFO phenomena, and it is oppressive. In fact, it's very worrying and very troubling how it all, if you look at the jigsaw puzzle, if you were in a giant hot air balloon, Bob, looking over this landscape that I'm painting to you that involves UFOs and world affairs, it's one hell of a frightening situation to look at. And so, we've had, since I last spoke to you, I've had all kinds of incidents. Your listeners may not know that I've been, back in the 90s, I've been followed and stalked because I had UFOs over my house. I had one UFO come in and illuminate a TV antenna, and then I came under bizarre surveillance with the phone going, unmarked helicopters. A guy in a pub who's still at large, who made my life hell with his mind-invasive technology. But Bob, to all intents and purposes, the golden adage is this: it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So what we have is we have a scenario where they know, the governments know, the intelligence services know, and the military know that UFO exists. They also know that people are being targeted with mind control. But research on the internet regarding mind control is present. and they know it, but they deny it. And it's easier to label someone an absolute raving monster lunatic than it is to come clean with the public, which they will never do, about this mind-invasive technology. And so those individuals who are being targeted by mind control are called targeted individuals in the UK, Thailand, Japan, America, people's lives being made hell by this technology. And in some cases, it's very complex. The targeting and the nature of the targeting, Bob, is so complex and downright disturbing, frankly, for your listeners. But if you have this kind of liaison with the people, as I have, behind the UFOs, and you become a contactee or an experiencer, a bit like the guys out of Close Encounters, you'll get targeted, Bob. And it's an unelected secret police that does it. And the governments of this world know it goes on, and they are in full-blown lockdown over it going on. And what is even more fascinating is how world affairs appear to be orientating themselves towards a global conflict. That's especially true of China and Russia, and the fact that these UFOs are monitoring that situation, monitoring world affairs, and the fact that we are being presented with something else, we are being shown an alternative to it all by these advanced people in the UFOs is pretty interesting. But you couldn't just trust them, Bob.
What I'm going to ask you, Tony, as well is, you've been followed and have you had your phone tapped as well and monitored? And it must be when it happens day in and day out, it's got to get you down eventually.
It does, mate. That's the idea. In general, that's the idea. But it's also part of an advanced element, an advanced, how can I put it, psychic espionage element to it. Once again, when the governments of America and even Russia, for that matter, did research into remote viewing, it wasn't just remote viewing they were researching. They were researching remote influencing. They were researching anything at all that could give them an edge in terms of psychic warfare, because psychic warfare is a branch of mind control. It's a branch of the occult, and sooner or later, I think, Bob, when they were experimenting with remote viewing, the Americans base it on a signal from noise system. What they do is they based it roughly. They based it on the Dolby noise system, whereby the remote viewer, in simple terms for your listeners, remote viewing in simple terms is if I close the book, Bob, if I put a book in front of you, closed it and then said, Bob, close your eyes. Tell me, what is in that book? We don't know. The book's locked. It's got secrets in it. Can you tell us, Bob, with your eyes closed, what is in that book? Well, remote viewing, when the Americans developed it, was a process of bypassing the noise of the mind to get to the information in that book with one's eyes closed, kind of thing, in the most simplest of terms for your audience. It's a bit deeper than that, but no sooner or later, I think, had they been experimenting with all that, they'd have come across the UFOs. They'd have come across the people in the UFOs. They will have understood quite clearly with these black projects that communication with people in other worlds is as simple as the speed of thought, as simple as telepathy. And we can come to that because I had a bizarre incident this week with the ET'S coming in over my house, as they do. They fly over in the UFOs, as they do and have done. But little did I know, Bob, currently in the 1990s, I got targeted by this most bizarre technology, phone surveillance. I woken up at 6 o'clock, woken up at 5 o'clock with alarm bells ringing in my head, woken up to go to the toilet. Clear, precise, auditory orders, accented with dialect. So it's not just a product of schizophrenia and hearing voices. It's kind of like mind invasive. My government, the governments know that this is going on, but they tend to keep it quiet. So I was on the receiving end of this horrendous mind control police. It was Orwellian in scope. It's sinister in the extreme. And sometimes, in some cases, you have to think in the back of the mind as to whether somebody is larking around and presenting you with all these visions. But then there comes a state of understanding with these UFOs, Bob, when you suddenly realise that they are the real deal because of the stuff that they're saying and coming out with, especially with world affairs and what is going on and kinds of predictions that they are making. And that's interesting. And the people behind the UFOs are many and varied. they look like me and you, Bob, but they don't quite, kind of thing. That's a big secret. You know, they look like me and you, but not quite. You can kind of like, their facial structure might be extremely different to us, but the two arms, so, you know, the two arms, I'm going to say two heads then, I feel like I've got two heads. The two arms, two legs kind of architecture is symbolic throughout the universe. Yeah, so, you know,
Tony, you know, when you get targeted as an individual and thoughts, what do you actually hear? Is it like tuning into a radio?
Well, all I can say is that you'll bloody know about it, mate. If you get hit, you'll know. If you get targeted, you'll know about it. People can stand there, look at you, and go, "Oh, it's Nino." So yeah, whatever. That doesn't go on it bloody well.
Voices,
voices, and but not only voices. Gunfire. Something called also reflexive response targeting, whereby you can suddenly, without warning, hit yourself in the face without knowing when you're being a targeted individual. You know, the gunfire, the screaming, also visionary downloading as well to crack the psyche, to make sure that you become a complete basket case. In my case, Bob, because UFOs are involved, what happened with my targeting was they'd opened up a whole kind of, what they'd done is the people who targeted me had walked into something that they didn't understand. They'd literally walked into a great big bloody circus out there that I'm only vaguely grasping, and I consider myself pretty good with knowing the landscape of these UFOs. And that's what they walked into. They walked into a civilization, for example, that we know as Nordic, blonde, blue-eyed individuals. They're very real. They're the real deal, Bob. They walked into them. They bumped into them. They're advanced. Their technology is, so they tell me, 700 years ahead of us. And their flight technology of their craft is highly advanced with their triangles, artificially intelligence. The technology that they have, our country could learn a hell of a lot from them. But their agendas, Bob, are vague. The information they give can be very vague. If you go around giving people the impression that you're erecting the landing strip and here come the Space Brothers in the back garden, you're asking for trouble, because it doesn't work like that in real life. I know, for example, when they're coming in over the house, I know sometimes that 3 and 4 in the morning they have awoken me to announce that they're over the house and to announce where they've come from. I suppose, Bob, the logical question is, if I'm targeted, does that mean somebody is gaslighting me?
It's very strange, isn't it?
Technology, yeah. You see, so that is the thing. But then what happens is you start getting an information dialogue with them, very subtle, that proves that in no way this is somebody making it up. And the fact of the matter is, Bob, is that they look like us, and and there is no doubt in my mind as to who they are and what they are. And the fact that it's also spiritual journey, the fact that they said to me I would not be able to understand their science. However, they, being clever people, know the individual Earth humans who would be able to understand their science. And I can guarantee, Bob, I put money on it that there'll be some scientists and people out there who are having liaison with them, and they're keeping it quiet. And so that's the situation with them. I've come a long way since I first put my website up, which was something called ET Life, where I assumed to know what was going on in the 90s. I just assumed that I knew what was going on. I assumed this, I assumed that. And yet it really, really was shocking when they presented themselves. Really, truly about 2014, Bob, is when they kind of like upped the ante and said, this is us. We are the people who have been flying over your house. The who, the what, the when is fine, but the why, they're a little bit vague on. But there are some insights into why. And this Earth is a very strange and mysterious place to live on, Bob. The universe is a very strange and mysterious place to live on as well. You know, so I don't know, Bob, if you've got anything, if you want to add anything.
Have you, you know, you talk about these individuals, and have you ever met them?
When you say individuals, which ones, matey?
Well,
Sorry.
the ones what keep flying over
Yes.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You see, what happens is that this is what they taught me. I haven't actually. This is not plagiarized from anybody else's research. They tell me that they communicate in the environment of what is known as the continuum or the space-time continuum environment. When the Americans were doing their remote viewing programs, the mind kind of like back to the concept of the book, Bob. Yeah, I've told you to close your eyes. I've said to you, can you remote view the data in that book with your eyes closed, using the techniques that remote viewing that the Americans discovered and did a whole kind of special technique involving separating the signal from the noise, which is a fascinating story in itself. And so what happens is, Bob, is that you close your eyes and you transmit a signal in a way to that book. You kind of like, in very simple terms, you kind of like close your eyes and think, what's in the book? Let's see. Oh, there's some flowers. I see ships. I see this. I see that. Oh, I see this. I see the sea. You know, you're writing it all down. The book's actually Moby Dick, but you don't know that, for example. So you're getting data coming in, right?
yeah.
But what would happen, Bob, is that you'd see something like, I think the book's Moby Dick. I see this whale. I see a whale. It must be Moby Dick. No, hang on. It's a book about killer whales. Now, it was Moby Dick that you were actually seeing. But what happens is, 3 to 2 seconds in, you get a kick that says, no, it isn't Moby Dick. It's actually a book about killer whales. And that's noise. The signal was Moby Dick, but the noise was the book on killer whales. And that concept is known as analytical overlay on the mind, where the mind sees the signal, but then a secondary part of the mind, the conscious mind, actually kicks in and says, no, it isn't. It's a book on whales. Yeah. Now, in that process, your mind is in an environment that we can barely understand when it's receiving data and information. And it's in that environment where communication is occurring and where time, as we know it, is collapsed. So time doesn't exist either. So that's what you've got. And they call that the space-time continuum. And so what happens is these ETs step into that continuum, and you'll see them, Bob, in your mind's eye, as I did. They will step in and they will say hello. Only last week, something deeply spiritual. It was a human-looking ET. She was a woman, and she stepped into my arena as I slept. There is no mistaking it. Beautiful brunette-looking lady. In some cases, these civilizations revere the female. They worship the female. Unlike the train wreck stuff that we see today, where women are somehow disrespected. It's very having come from a background of abuse, Bob, as well, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the targeting as well, it takes its toll on you also. The targeting can be very complex in that it tries to derail you and train wreck you, tries to create noise in you, and the signal is stood in front of you. The signal is, for example, the human-looking ET. The noise is all the targeting. The alarm clock's ringing in your head, the gunfire, all noise designed to dumb down the population in some way, designed, that's the thing. But this was a female ET, and they look like us. She's a bit taller, jaw structure, very different from us, but deeply spiritual, flowing black hair. There was no mistaking who it was, no mistaking it at all. And she communicated something called a concept that I hadn't heard of before, called the 13 core spiritualists. Now that hints to me that they have like the Lord of the Rings, like a Fellowship of the Ring, is what she was communicating to me. And that happened kind of last week. And it's interesting, Bob, because what you've got is this very big movement of non-human forces navigating through human affairs. The American president that's just been elected might be a nightmare because he might take us to war with China. This guy Trump, who's just been elected.
Yes.
He might be, and that's very worrying. It really is because, Bob, when these psychic espionage units of Russia and America, especially the Russians, when they studied remote viewing, the Russians, for example, didn't just study remote viewing. they studied psychic warfare and they studied psychic influence, how to influence somebody with the mind. And they were doing this on world leaders, and they were doing it, and the Americans knew it as 8 ability. The Russians, I can't remember the term. They had the remote viewing for the Russians was called information channeling. The Russians, when they did remote influencing, for example, Bob, I'll close my eyes now and tell you to pick up a glass of water, for example. That would be remote influencing. But the Russians called that walk-in mind operation. So there's a different terminology, but all roads led to Rome. You see.
So they could influence the major leaders around the world.
Yes, and there's kind of like I've forgotten his name. There's a Russian website called New Cosmology, NOOCOSMOSOL, as in cosmology. Add new NOO and then cosmology altogether. One word. It's the Russian website translated. That's the interesting one. They've got an English one, but don't go to that one. Go to the Russian one, translate it. They've got publications that you couldn't get in the West about remote viewing and remote influencing. What is interesting about it is there's a whole report done by one of the remote influencers on his remote influencing of Madeleine Albright to prevent what they thought was a security risk to the Russians. I'm not saying in any way, shape or form that Russia has got a halo around its head. Well, certainly NATO hasn't either. I think they're actually, frankly, Bob, all as bad as each other. But what I'm thinking of is just giving you an insight into what went on. And it's interesting to note that there was a guy on there called Joseph McMoneagle. Joseph McMoneagle was America's #1 remote viewer. And he sent me an email because my experiences, Bob, are that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Special, unique, frontline in the thick of it, that I'm probably classed that they have a term called an exceptional human experience, or EHE. It's a term when they're searching all this for somebody who's had extreme paranormal experiences like I have. And so what Joe said was, take a look at this guy. He's called Alexei Savin. He was my opposite number in the KGB, he said, which is odd because in 1960 my father was approached by the KGB in Vienna, so he told me. And my father was potently psychic, Bob. He could heal cats from the dead. He brought my Uncle Bill back to life when the ambulance crew thought he was a goner, when somebody had a heart attack. Healed a lady's neuralgia. But when I was a naughty boy, he would, by the power of influence, give me a headache. Like you'd not believe. He wouldn't hit me, just give me a headache and I'd end up sparking on the bed.
So you knew exactly then what he was doing to you?
No, I didn't at that time. I was only 9, 10 years of age. He was an abusive, horrible man. He wasn't a nice man at all. He was not a nice man. But you see, I have to wonder in my scenario, Bob, whether he was targeted as well. You see, you've got to think of these things as to whether he was actually targeted. I remember quite clearly something happened with a family member. And I remember one day he just said, right, well, we're not having this. I hope the place burns down. And he closed his eyes one evening, and the boiler house, the place blew up. Never forget it. And it was a Tuesday night, that was. I'll never forget him sat there, Rob. He sat in that living room, closed his eyes, bang, bloody thing blew up. Luckily, there was nobody in the building. It wasn't vacated. But up it went. Because that was the kind of thing he did, unbeknown to him. So he could influence, you see. He could actually influence events and situations, unbeknown to him. And so this is what happened with the KGB. They set up this special unit called Troop 10,003. And if your listeners look at Pravda online, you will see the head of Troop 10,003, a guy called Alexei Savin, giving an interview to the Russian media about his special unit's operations involving liaison with the people behind the UFOs. And he used women, Bob. He didn't use men, he used women because they were a lot better at sussing out what was going on, and they were a lot better at hearing the signal from the noise, because that's what the Russians were very good. The quality information control is what they were after, that unit was after. So they could separate noise and information, and they got information. And what he was saying to the Russian media, this guy was the fact that his unit was speaking to them, but it was spiritual. Nothing military was given by these people behind the scenes in UFOs. Medical information was given, but nothing military was given about who they were, what their military information was, how their craft operated militarily, all that kind of thing. None of that information was given. And so you see, you've got this understanding, this roadmap between America and Russia in terms of psychic warfare, of knowing what is going on behind the scenes. They know. And what is even more other is that the CIA funded it. The CIA funded the KGB's operations to do with remote viewing. It's even on their website. It's on the Russian remote viewing website, New Cosmology. Amazing. So many million. Amazing, isn't it? The CIA actually funded them. And that's...
How crazy is that?
Yeah. You see, so what is baffling is we get this saber rattling that Russia is the new enemy, and then we'll get the Russians telling their people that NATO is the enemy. Everybody's being played like a fiddle. Therefore, the question must be, what is it behind the scenes that will do that? And they know, but still the circus goes on. So there you go, Bob. That gives your listeners some. I know as well. I know also. We who know pay, but don't pay a price so much, Bob. But we who know it comes with a cost. It's all very nice sat on the radio program here talking to you about all this, and your listeners find it fascinating. But there's a price tag to it in terms of your life, in terms of your sanity, in terms of everything. There's been a very high price tag for this information. And you don't know the ethics of the ETs and the UFOs. You don't know if they respect human rights. You don't know what they're doing or why they're here. Their agenda could be military. Their agenda could be one that you don't understand. And that's not to say either that they respect your rights as a human being. So you don't know what you're dealing with. So it's all right. A woman stood there. She looks ET, absolutely fascinating to look at, which she was. And you're deeply intrigued as to who she is. But what's she doing there? Who is she? Where does she come from? Is she a military person? Is she one of their military? Actually, she's like the equivalent of a psychic alien. Do you get what I'm saying? If you look at Judge Dredd, that there's that famous character, isn't there, Judge Dredd? And he had a psychic call where he had Judge Anderson, who was a female psychic call. They had a psych call. And I think that's what some of them are. I think some of them are psycho. And I think that some of the liaisons that have gone on with the superpowers in terms of their psychic espionage programs means that they will have stumbled across these individuals who are alien and look like us, or the Nordics. They'll have stumbled across them, Bob. They're bound to, because they're utilising a time continuum environment where these people are going to be active. They're going to bump into them, you see, mate. I think I've yapped on for a bit there, but there you go.
No. It's a very fascinating subject. Can you tell us a bit about this alien Nordic superhighway then?
Yeah, well, alien noetic superhighway is really I like the term very much. I just saw it on the internet. I thought, that's a good term to use. A noetic superhighway, or an alien noetic superhighway, is in fact a space-time continuum. At the moment, in this kind of year 2016, they haven't quite grasped it yet, but they will. Elements of humanity will grasp this work. This leads to kind of like a very famous, it's not a famous term, a term that the aliens use with me called Yasmat. Yasmat is Sanskrit. The aliens are familiar with Sanskrit. They use Sanskrit as a language, and they know of this as Yasmat, the Yasmat paradox, the causal effect of a situation as a causal effect. So the work you're doing, Bob, the work we're all doing in a way, has a causal effect on the human race. It cannot be stopped, and it means that we will begin to move to utilize knowledge. We have those civilizations out there are 700 years ahead of us with a spiritual component to them, a deep understanding of the spirituality of what is going on. I'm the most god-awful person, Bob, when it comes to spirituality. I'm the most ill-disciplined guy when it comes to it, and yet I'm the guy who needs to understand it the most, and I'm the guy having all the paranormal experiences.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from there. is because you just haven't got the time to settle down and do a little bit of meditation or whatever to help you.
This is right. Not only that, you see, when you've got kind of complex targeting going on, it means that you're continually bombarded by a psychic noise that's trying to constantly derail you from understanding what is going on. What is going on, Bob, is that we are connected to a higher universal intelligence. Some members of humanity have, for some reason, communicated with it, even if it was for a second. And the thing is such an almighty power, communicating with one man in the street or a woman in the street for a split second is seen and heard. And that's why you're getting human beings probably with high levels of paranormal activity and UFO activity around them, because in some cases, the universe is a mystery to the aliens as it is to us. That's especially true of the Nordics, the blonde, blue-eyed people who are an advanced culture. They are an advanced civilization, and they are aware of the higher dimensional celestial plane that surrounds this universe. And it's there, a higher dimension. It's the thing that they kind of spiritually understand. And it happens to me, Bob, in Southport, during the targeting, when I was getting horrifically hit. It's too disturbing for your listeners, but when you get targeted, you will get targeted. And so I was being targeted on this particular morning. God, was I being hit. I was being hit because it's all about the noise and the signal and the ascension and the progress that humanity makes and the future of where we're going. And some people don't want that future to happen, Bob. And so I was getting hit. And I awoke around about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, right, I'm just going to sit outside with the camera. So I went out into my friend's garden. I was looking after the house in Southport there. And I just sat, and all of a sudden, this UFO just came over the house, and it prowled around backwards and forwards, and it was one of these dotted white UFOs. Put them up on YouTube, and you get the usual crowd going, oh, well, it's a dot of light. That's not very good footage, but they don't understand that it's forming part of a historical narrative. These UFOs are bigger than what they look like. They're highly capable craft. So this thing's prowling around backwards and forwards. There's air traffic knocking around, but you can tell the difference, and it's avoiding the air traffic as they do. They're aware of the air traffic around them, which they would be, Bob, because they're piloted. Yeah, they're piloted craft. That these things are intelligent craft. They know, they're aware. So I got tired, and I remember thinking, why is that thing flying up and down and not really doing anything else other than flying up and down? Well, it was very surprising. It was doing more than just flying around, but that's what it appeared to be doing. So I went back to bed, and I fell asleep to be presented with this vision, this extraordinary vision of what could only be described as the mystery behind Jacob's ladder. You know the famous image of Jacob and the ladder and so on.
Yes, I do, yeah.
It was the mystery, or the understanding was what was behind the ladder. And that is the kind of the scientific base and spiritual science and understanding of the mystery of the higher dimensions, the mystery of the higher intelligence at work and its scientific base and its understanding. It was a spectacular vision, and it has been with me for a very long time now, and I'm coupled to it, Bob. But really, frankly, the experiences that I've had with UFOs and the associated darker elements of the esoteric around it has really train wrecked me. It really come with a price. It's nearly sent me, you'll go stir crazy if you're not careful with it. Because really, in some cases, it's very much really Master Yoda in Star Wars when he's stirring his cooking pot. That's what it's really all about. That's what the mastery is all about, the very basics of living and enjoying life. But unfortunately, that's denied to somebody like me who's in the thick of it all. It's just not easy, Bob. And so that vision has been my guiding vision and light ever since. Now, you can imagine these two opposing esoteric forces, a force that rules the affairs of the human race, and a force like that from another dimension, from a higher dimension, that's responsible for like an architecture of the universe, clashing with each other. Can you imagine the gravity of that? Such as these two forces just bang into each other, Bob.
Yeah.
And that probably describes, in a nutshell, I think, what is going on behind the scenes. And some of us are tuned into that. Hence the reason for all this high activity of UFOs and the ETs and all that kind of thing. What we're perhaps talking about is the divine.
But I was just going to ask you about, you know, when you're going to time travel and you're going to different zones, so you could actually see yourself coming backwards and forwards then.
Yes. In terms of time travel, yes, you could, but that's actually not a bad concept to actually put. Rudimentary speaking, the concept of time travel can be shown via the traveling of thought and consciousness in a space-time continuum, because in a time continuum, time has collapsed. Therefore, 2016, 2116 could all happen at once in a space-time continuum, and everybody would see each other. But that means there is a distinct possibility that if you are, as our great spiritual teachings say, born again and reincarnated, there's a distinct scenario and paradox going on where the future you sees you in the past, and the past as it now sees you in the future. And that can cause a very odd scenario. So what I think I'm getting at is that the UFO contact experiencer goes through hell and goes through experiences that are far beyond what they're being told on the internet and what they're being told in books. They have to cope with all that kind of stuff, Bob. The effects of time travel and time displacement on the consciousness and all that kind of thing is something that they have to put up with. And they're not told. Nobody tells them this. The people in the UFOs don't tell them it because they have their own agendas to follow. So they're not quite telling. So there's this very concerning drip of information from the UFOs coming in, but not too much and not too little, just not enough to quite understand what's going on. That's the thing, but just enough to roughly understand it. Do you see? But that might
they don't want you to know too much.
They might not want. There again, for safety reasons, they might not want you to know too much. They really might not, because you just don't know. You've got to be so careful, because you've got to be careful what you say, because you don't know the effects it can have. So you've just got to be careful on that one. But they're certainly out there, and that's especially true of the blonde or blue-eyed aliens, which I think we can now move into and talk about when they presented themselves to me in about 2014, and they really started appearing over the house and liaising and kind of like saying hello. It was unbelievable, Bob. Absolutely unbelievable. So what you've got is this civilization who are Nordic. The Chinese universities, if you look at some of their data, indicated that the Nordic, the blonde, blue-eyed aliens, probably built pyramids in China. But this is not UFO researchers saying this. This is China's academics saying this. They have reason to say that some pyramids that were built in China were by them. There's some school of thinking to suggest that the Nordics also appeared in Ireland. And there's some school of thinking to suggest, well, in Zulu folklore, they're known as the Wazugu, or the people of the dust devil. And what is interesting about that is the Zulu got this term for them, which is called Wazugu. So when the Europeans turned up on the Zulu nation, they called them Wazugu and thought that they were aliens from the skies above, because the first people who the Zulu saw were aliens. And the term Wazugu means blonde, roughly blonde Nordic alien from the skies above. You see, so this folklore of the blonde Nord, the blonde blue-eyed race, being throughout our history, interacting with us, watching us, is still ongoing even today. It most certainly is, Bob.
I don't know if you want to talk about it, but you've nearly died a few times.
Yeah. In the in the course of what has been going on, you have esoteric forces, as in what is hidden, navigating human affairs. And some of these esoteric forces are very ancient. And there's a story by Alec Newald called Co-Evolution, Bob. He wrote a book called Co-Evolution. And his book is all about him travelling down the road in New Zealand to Auckland. And he ends up getting, 10 days later, he's not in Auckland. In fact, he doesn't quite know where he is, but he's not where he should be. 10 days have elapsed and he doesn't quite know what the hell's happened to him. And he gets people turn up at his house from, so he claims, the Defence Research Agency, Australia, and so he claims, Royal Institute of International Affairs. He said in his book that he had to find out who Rio was because he hadn't heard of them. This is what he said. He said, we've got to assume that the guy might have presented a dodgy card, a dodgy ID card. That might be, I've got to, But basically, that's what he said had happened. They wanted to confiscate his car. Why did they want to confiscate his car? Because the car had been subjected to high electrical voltage, and they wanted to know why. Actually, they knew he'd been abducted before he did. That's normally the case, Bob.
Right.
When I got targeted, these guys who targeted me, these guys and girls who targeted me knew that I was having interaction with UFOs before I did, because they have a rudimentary monitoring system in place that can track them. That's why, I suggest. So what happened with Alec was he'd been abducted for 10 days and he wrote the book Co-Evolution. And they refused to cooperate with these people. And so they kind of attempted to get him in jail. That can happen to any contactee experiencer where they're threatened legally, threatened with this, threatened with that, because there's this unwritten code that says you are not allowed to have a liaison with these people. You're not allowed to know. It's an unwritten law, in fact, but it is
right.
Honest, I believe. So what is interesting, in his book, he met an alien called Xena. He thought that ghosts were approaching him because he thought he'd had a road traffic accident. He thought he was out of his body and was dead. But he wasn't. He indicates in his book that he was approached by a male and a female alien. They were aliens from another dimension. In the dialogue of his book, it says that the alien said that with affairs on planet Earth, the Earth is ruled by a force, a very ancient force that should be respected. It's ruled the planet for centuries, and it should be respected, Bob. And that is probably the most profound sentence ever written in any UFO book or in any contactee's experiences communication with them, because it is ruled. This Earth is, it is ruled. It most definitely is. And that's what came a knocking for me. And I can only describe it, Bob, as being not a pleasant experience to be in collision with that, what they talk of, to hit it full on, and for it to know who you are, and to say, listen, son, if this continues, curtains. And you're thinking, oh dear, because she said that important remark. It's a life form that should be respected. It's a form of life. It's the most spiritually profound sentence that has ever been uttered to a UFO contactee, because it's absolutely true. And so this is what happened. And if I had not have respected it, Bob, if I'd have not kind of, let us say, just stopped, set back on the fence, because sometimes the good guys do not win, I don't think I'd have been sat here now. You've got to know when you're out of your depth. You've got to know when you're outgunned and outclassed. And I don't think that I would have been here now to tell the tale.
So what happened after that then, Tony?
What happened after that is that this thing that we talk of was actually countered by an advanced intelligence, by these people in the UFOs who knew what this was all about. Or they would have done. They've studied it 700 years ahead of us, so they know exactly what's going on. There was a confrontation between those two forces, which means I'm still alive to tell the tale. I couldn't even begin to put it into words to your listeners, but just it was correct what happened. These two forces collided and had a bit of an argument about it all. And then, and then kind of like on 3 to 2 occasions now, my sanity and life has been saved by these people who are blonde and blue-eyed in the UFOs. They presented themselves in 2014 with the most astounding vision to me in sleep. There was no doubt about it. It was then. I was offered to do some filming for Channel 4, just oddly enough, outside the Royal Institute of International Affairs, but that bears no... I don't know whether that bears any resemblance. I've no idea. I just found it very odd that these people knew where I was going, and so just had this direct visual communication, which was done by the illustrator Lloyd Canning. 2 triangle craft. It was a spectacular vision in sleep, Bob, of 2 triangle craft and 2 clocks. The craft was spectacular. It was their craft, because they are triangle craft. A cursory look on the internet, there's some very good shots of them on the move in their triangular craft. 2 clocks, one at 5 to midnight, one at 1/4 to midnight, and the flashing symbol of an avatar. And this guy speaking to somebody, and he was blonde and blue-eyed. He was unmistakable Nordic. And he was speaking to somebody, but whoever it was he was speaking to, the volume was muted, so you couldn't hear what he was saying, but he was talking to someone. And it was more or less saying that we're on the slippery slope here with Ukraine, back it off. There's an old article that I've got that I wrote many years ago where I suspected that the same people had also warned India and Pakistan to back it off, which they would do because in the Ladakh region of India, UFOs are not allowed to fly. Air Force do not go in that area. China and Indian Air Force, certain areas are no-fly zones because of UFOs in India. But they keep it quiet. But this was the kind of thing that was going on, Bob. And then what happened is, about a few months later, Lloyd Canning did this vision, and I was expecting these UFOs to be filmed again. I still expect them to come over. I expect to actually film them, capture them really good on camera. I'm expecting it. But they are most respectful of the UK's authorities, and they don't want to panic the military authorities, and they're most respectful. I do know that for a fact. I'm just thinking, if you could, our finest scientific brains of this country, meeting up with them, they could learn something, Bob, couldn't they?
Oh, of course they could, yes.
Of course they could. They could. Medical advances, medical technological advances. But you see, we're in a paradigm where we don't want that. We want a war with Russia. And Russia doesn't want that. It wants a war with NATO. And the people of the West are going to be told that Russia's the bad guy. And the people of Russia are going to be told that the West is the bad guy, or even China for that matter. And we're going to have a conflict situation. But these UFOs are quite aware of this. As to whether they will intervene if it was a conflict scenario, I don't know. I really don't. We're going into, when it comes to global conflict and the prevention of it, we then come across these esoteric forces that have kind of like steeped mankind in chaos for years. So one has got to be very careful around that area. But basically, these guys and girls from this advanced civilization were present. And what happened then, Bob, was Lloyd Canning did the illustration. There was this huge air exercise over the town. You've never seen anything like it. It was as if we were being invaded. It was as if RAF, where was it now? Linton, Coningsby, they decided to have this exercise over the town. Not just over the town, but specifically the field where Lloyd had drawn these triangles was being paid special attention to. In fact, They had Typhoon fighters doing aerial dogfights over the field. They had a Hercules transporter, which caused much fascination for the people of the town. Hercules transporter. It wasn't a transporter. They are a transporter aircraft, aren't they? But this thing was bristling with antennas. It must have circled my house at least 7 times. The footage is on YouTube. And we ran some image analysis on it because some of the townsfolk had taken photos of it here, there, and everywhere of it on the prowl over the town. It had done some combat kind of rapid turnaround land takeoff technique that it does. For your listeners, a Hercules has the capability of coming in very sharp, landing, doing a narrow turnaround in a small space and taking straight off again. It's a combat training technique that they do. And they were doing that on Byrne Airfield. And we ran some analysis on some of the photos because I bet, I kind of like knew that the UFOs would be following them. And they were. They were there. They were shadowing. And one wonders, so what's happening is that that field that I'm talking about, which is a good mile away, Bob, near the River Ouse, has been subjected to aerial surveillance by the Air Force. And also, when I've been out there with my ham radio gear, hoping to catch a glimpse of them, I got passed very low by a tornado jet, bristling with electronic pods on it, came in very low, right over the top of me. Then we had a scenario going on where what I believe to be a Reaper drone flew over the garden in August or September of this year. A Reaper drone is like an unmanned aerial aircraft used for unmanned observation. It's been coming backwards and forwards. Some people said it was an airliner, which I don't believe. I believe that it was what it was, a UAV.
But you could see it plainly.
Yeah, I could see it plainly, but not quite plain enough, Bob, to get a good identification on it. But it had the usual wingspan. It had an unusual wingspan on it. It was very stub-nosed. I think, and some of the lads who do the image analysis on me think that it is a UAV. It's not the UAV that's of interest, Bob. It's what happened above the UAV as it flew over. Because a UFO, I suspect 2 UFOs, nosedived it. According to analysis, this UAV got nosedived by 2 small UFOs that were traveling at tremendous speed. In fact, when you slow the footage down on various players to the most minimal, so it's hardly moving, the bloody things are moving at great speed. You can't slow it down. What they're seeing is not so much a threat or a posturing to attack. They're seeing a communication take place, like a handshake going on, more or less saying, this is our scientific understanding of flight technology. Hello. Your future, if you can take it. This is what I believe is going on. So our military and our government would be stupid not to get a piece of that action, would be stupid not to understand it and enhance it, which is why I think that there are some scientific brains out there who are probably having dialogue with them. I'm having dialogue with them not from a scientific viewpoint, but from a spiritual understanding, from a spiritual viewpoint as to how it's all mapped out and what is going on. That's what I believe is happening, Bob. But the footage is fascinating. Blinkered, you'd miss it. These 2 UFOs in Worthing, a friend of mine, who's also being watched by UFOs. We've concluded that we're possibly related in some way. She had an incident where a helicopter was hovering over her estate, and this UFO, we've got the analysis on my YouTube channel, this UFO just appears out of nowhere as if it's torn itself in space-time, stepped into our world, and just goes for this helicopter, Bob. And I mean, just goes for it. The guys in the helicopter must have been deeply shocked because the bloody thing just kind of like went for them. And I'm thinking, and it in civil aviation rules, that would have been an air miss. That would have been actually recorded as an air miss. But this UFO buzzed the helicopter. So you've got this kind of thing going on at the moment where these UFOs are establishing, attempting communication. The UFO incident I have in 1999 is one where a UFO came in and illuminated a television antenna near my house, which caused surveillance, caused unmarked helicopters, caused all kinds of problem. And then you've not seen the footage, Bob, but last year, it's quite amazing. I'm a radio ham. I've got a HF antenna in the back garden used for communicating across high-frequency shortwave. It's a vertical. UFO comes in over the garden, but instead of it, what it did is it morphed itself. It shrunk itself. It flew through the antenna and then flew outside it again. And you can see it on a visual analysis. The thing's literally gone through the antenna. The guy at the Daily Express thought that was complete rubbish and it must have been camera shake or an optical effect. Well, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was the UFO clearly demonstrating a technology that is 700 years ahead of us that can morph, reshape, and come back out again. The technology, for example, if you look at Brazil, where there was an abductee, contactee in Brazil abducted, his bed sheets, when he claimed he was abducted by Nordic aliens, his bed sheets, the cotton threads, and the fibers show an actual advanced heat control technology where one fiber is not scorched, but the other fiber is. What is baffling the textile scientists is how the hell can you subject one fibre to high heat and one fibre is left untouched as if completely cold?
True.
Baffling. So what I'm trying to do, isn't it?
That is amazing.
Amazing, isn't it? And this is where we get into it now, Bob. This is where we get into amazing with it all. This is where we get, it's beyond my understanding. I've been honoured to get a glimpse of that from them. It's beyond my understanding. I've had one hell of a childhood with it all. I'm not an academic man, but I've been honoured to get glimpses and insights that I can understand and just communicate in a very rudimentary way, and that's an honour in itself. So you see, there is a scientific technological base being presented to us with a spiritual understanding. As Colonel Corso said in his book, The Day After Roswell, it's a future, a nice future if we can handle it, which it is. But there are some disturbing scenarios going on, Bob. So there you go, just coming up to 9 o'clock, I think, there, isn't it? So I don't know if listeners have got any questions or if you've got anything to add further or how we're doing for chat.
What do you think disclosure will come?
I tell you, no, not via government, Bob. I think what is happening is, at the moment, individuals in prominent places of government, science, the military, possibly even intelligence services, space exploration, and even people like myself at a very rudimentary level are being schooled and educated. The UFOs, are disclosing to us. Governments aren't disclosing. Not with that circus in the background of what I described to you of esoteric forces of movement among the affairs of man. There is absolutely no way that the American government under Trump certainly won't be disclosing. They didn't under Obama. They're not disclosing anything, Bob. But the UFOs are subtly disclosing information. What is fascinating about the information disclosure pace is the pace is very kindergarten. Their presentation and understanding to mainstream guy in the street like myself, yourself, even members of the current elected government, the pace of that disclosure and scientific understanding will be very kindergarten, very plod, plod, plod. They will only go at a pace we understand. These guys are pretty smart people and pretty advanced. And I think what happened is, Bob, with me, is that I got myself involved in a mystery that I didn't understand and they didn't understand. And that's probably kind of like the very basic of my experiences as to how it all began, as to why I had such paranormal activity. So I'm a walking mystery, and they're watching a mystery unfold. Even though they have this advanced technology, sometimes the universe is a mysterious place, Bob.
Oh God, yeah, but there's more people seeing UFOs now than ever. It's not all pictures being dubbed with or whatever. Some people, because they've got phones now, they can take photos.
Yes, yes, indeed. So the other evening, for example, I had 2 UFOs coming over the house. They spoke to me. They flew on their merry way. They asked how I was. I have an understanding of where they come from. They have an understanding that I know where they come from. They were aware, once again, there was an aircraft in the vicinity. They were aware of it. They avoided it. They just said hello, asked how I was, commented on what a very good job I was doing with my care duties, and then went on their way. But that's the kind of dialogue that happens, and they were female pilots. If that, it's a lot to, maybe that's a lot to handle for a lot of people, but for me, when you've been born with it and you've had to deal with it all your life, that liaison becomes quite the norm. What is interesting is the kind of like who they are, what their spiritual culture is all about, what their philosophies are all about, what their folklore is all about. It would be fascinating, Bob, in a few months from now, if I came back on your program and kind of like was explaining their philosophy. One of these groups at the Nord, for example, have a life philosophy. I don't know what that is yet, but they do. I'm told that they have what's known as a life philosophy. These people are pretty sharp geezers, pretty sharp guys and girls, and it's as if their civilization is kind of like has grasped the wider spiritual Jacob's ladder type understanding of the universe around it. I don't think their lives have been far from perfect. I don't think it's been plain sailing for them, Bob, at all in the process of learning all this. I just think that we children compared to their understanding of the universe and that kind of thing, you know.
I know a lot of people are always wanting to know, who are the Men in Black?
Well, that's a good question. Who are the Men in Black? That's a very good question, because in the 1950s there was an agency, and you probably heard of Majestic 12, where there was an agency that was formed called the Collins Elite. And the Collins Elite was formed because they could not understand why in 1950 UFOs were coming in over United States airspace, and the US Air Force were blasting them out the sky with salvos, with aircraft called F-94 fighters. I think they were F-94s that could fire rockets 12 at a time, salvos, and that's what they were doing. They got these UFOs and they just hope for the best and fire a salvo of rockets at them. Or a UFO being hit by a salvo of rockets is going to bring it down. But what was interesting was they discovered, through research of Collins Elite, they discovered that in some cases these UFO interactions, and indeed the global picture that we see, is navigated by some very esoteric, occult kind of hidden forces called non-human entities, or NHEs. So I'm suggesting that the Men in Black could be an aspect of non-human entity. There's a possibility that is correct. I know I was speaking to Laura Eisenhower on my radio show, the great-granddaughter of Eisenhower himself.
Yes.
And she told me that the family were aware that her great-granddad suffered heart attacks because he knew about the situation with UFOs. He knew where it was all going. He knew that only a knowledgeable and alert citizenry meshed together would oppose this kind of situation that is going on that we see at the moment. You know, Bob, and so that appears to be it. We're at a crossroads, I think, with it all, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Yes, I know you've had a busy day. I know you're tired and everything like that. But it's so nice for you to come on the show at a very short notice.
No, don't worry, Bob. It's the pressure of being a UFO contactee is a pressure that people do not understand, and it carries. And you can't take yourself too seriously either. Sometimes you've got to roll with the punches and have a laugh with it. But at the end of the day, it's important information. And I think, Bob, that this will make an excellent interview, won't it? Once it gets, I'll probably get the MP3 and upload it, and it just make a fascinating interview. For the audience. I hope your audience have enjoyed it, Bob. Just before I go,
yes.
Have they got any questions? Has anybody got any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Nobody's coming up with anything. But Thank you so much. Where can everybody get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me on Facebook. I'm Tony Topping. You can't miss me. I've got the UFO illuminating the TV antenna. Or you can get me on my YouTube channel, which is Tony Ops UFO. There's some interesting. There's a lady. I've just interviewed her, actually. I like to interview unusual people, who was big with the British band Susan Fassbender. She was the guitarist with them. She was the composer guitarist. She was very big in the 1980s, and she's just recently been interviewing me about her UFO experiences. Just fascinating to listen to her. So that's the latest that's uploaded on my YouTube channel at the moment, Bob. I do recommend it.
So what's for the future for Tony Topping then?
Well, I think the future is going to be a major TV documentary and a book. I think personally, I definitely feel that there needs to be a jaw-droppingly good documentary done about what's been going on. It's certainly a film, Bob. It certainly is. That's what I want to do. That's my ambition, is to get a good documentary or a film just under my belt and publish my book. That's what I want to do, and possibly a stage play as well.
Because I don't think there's enough on TV, UK TV, proper discussions about UFOs and telling you exactly what about it.
No, there isn't. What you've got is production companies turning up with comedians who think it's a good thing to do. Comedians hosting these UFO documentaries, and also telling the people who've had UFO experiences that they have had UFO experiences when they haven't. They're just saying it. And that the scenario you've got is you can then have your footage edited, as did me, with the unmarked helicopter when it filmed me, to give a completely wrong impression to the audience. The recent one I did for Channel 4, they edited my helicopter footage, which was an unmarked helicopter. They edited that to make it look as if it was just a random helicopter flying across the sky, to give the impression that I was paranoid. Which they will, the edit, it's all in the edit, you see, isn't it, Bob?
That makes, Tony, but yeah. That makes you look bad then.
Well, yes,
you're
does,
not telling the truth.
Yeah, that's the spin. But the thing is that the public are not stupid. Like, for example, Brexit, they were all expecting the public to just stay in Europe and vote. But they got that wrong, didn't they? But the public, public, you know, I can go into my local pub, people will come up to me, people in responsible jobs as well, Bob, and they'll say that they had an abduction experience, they had a UFO encounter experience. The British public are very switched on to all this, very switched on, mate.
Yes, they are. Very switched on. People out there watching every day now.
Yeah, this is it. So I think that there needs to be a real good effort to make a TV docu.
Well, I hope it does, and I hope it's you what's doing it.
Well, here's hoping, Bob. Let's give it the best shot. Thank you for having me on the show, matey.
Hey, thank you, Tony. But I'll be in touch with you again anyway. We'll send you the Charity will send you the archives, or I will, of the show.
Oh, splendid. All right. I'd love to put this up on my YouTube channel, Bob. That'll be absolutely excellent. Thank you very much, Lee.
Hey, that's no problem. Or else Charity's got any, she wants to ask you a question.
Charity? She's fallen asleep, Bob. Oh, she's there. Oh, I hope. What happens is it just kind of like, and you've got to communicate it at a level that's kind of like quite, what's the word? Quite basic, because it's highly complex goings on. Really, and even me, the individual who's on the receiving end, don't know why. I don't know why. And nobody's telling me why. And that's very frustrating. Perhaps it's best I don't know why, Bob, but I don't know why. There you go.
Because it always seems to happen to you. You know, it's a lot of downloading into you.
Yeah. A lot
and sometimes it must be hard to take it in.
It is. It's shocking, matey. Absolutely shocking. What goes on behind the scenes, matey. The public are completely oblivious, and that's why, as Eisenhower said, and then MacArthur as well. MacArthur said words to the effect of Douglas MacArthur. Words to the effect of it wasn't the enemies that were outside of America that he was bothered about. It was the insipid enemies within that he was concerned about. MacArthur, definitely yes. So. So MacArthur, Eisenhower, they saw this. They certainly did. Even Disraeli indicated, the British Prime Minister, that there was something going on behind the scenes. Even he said it. You know. So there you go, Bob. That's it, matey. Thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, Tony, thank you so much again. You Very take good. Care, and I'll be in touch with you.
All right, Bob. Thank you so much. Cheers, mate.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. He's a character, he is. Oh, yes. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for being there for the show tonight. My guest